So let's talk about functional nutrition. So what's the definition of what we call a functional analysis of a person? Well, it's the evaluation of a patient's health through varying lab work, history, and other methods in order to try to find trends and patterns that indicate a suboptimal function of the body. Okay, so how do we kind of treat people after we find this suboptimal function? Well, in functional nutrition, what we'll utilize is we utilize vitamins, herbs, minerals, detoxification, whatever it is we need to use in order to support the body's function based upon the information that we gained in the analysis, okay? And remember, so our intent is to create optimal body function, okay? Especially when we've noticed that someone is suboptimal. So what's the difference in viewpoints and kind of how we approach a patient with a functional nutritionist versus a medical doctor, okay? Well, here's kind of the big differences, okay? In functional nutrition, what we do is we notice negative trending. That means that you're going towards a disease in the future, but instead of waiting for the disease to happen, we make the proper changes earlier rather than later, okay? And remember, we do that through vitamins, herbs, minerals, lifestyle changes, etc., to try to find the root cause about why you have the suboptimal function, okay? So remember, this is about prevention, not treatment, okay? And another big thing is that in functional nutrition, we look at the body as a whole unit, right? It's an interplay of all different types of things, all organ systems. You can't just pinpoint, okay, here's the one culprit, right? It's a whole slew of things, okay? Now let's take a look at what the medical perspective is on this, okay? In medicine, they treat the disease once it develops, okay? So let's take blood work, for example, okay? In functional nutrition, we have what we look at as a different set of ranges, okay, of what we consider optimal function. Okay, it's a much smaller range, okay? Versus in medicine, they have a very large, what they consider normal range, and then they have their disease ranges, okay? So what that means is that even if you have symptoms and it's obvious that you're trending towards a disease in the future, even with symptoms, you'll be considered normal if you fall into the very large normal range. So medical doctors are waiting for you to basically fall into a disease range before they do anything, right? But that doesn't really make sense, right? Because it's a lot easier to prevent something from occurring than it is to do it, to try to treat it once it's already happened, okay? Next big thing is that for treatment, medical doctors are going to do two things usually. Pharmaceutical drugs and surgery to treat the symptoms of a disease, but they never really look for the cause of a disease, okay? An example of this is, let's say you have a cancerous tumor, okay? They're going to treat that tumor, probably excise it with surgery and then give you chemo and drugs. But they're not going to ask, well, why is this individual constantly producing cancerous tumors, right? Versus a functional nutritionist might say, oh, well, they have a lot of environmental factors that cause cancer. They aren't very good at detoxing. They're not intaking a lot of antioxidants, which help fight cancerous tumors and keep them away, etc. Another big difference is, remember, while functional nutrition is about prevention, medicine is about treatment, okay? And then lastly, whereas the functional nutritionists look at the body as a whole, as we discussed, medical doctors separate the body into different pieces, okay? So they have a cardiologist, an endocrinologist, a gastroenterologist, a rheumatologist, right? All these little subsets, they look at just a little piece and they think, okay, well, here's the answer. The problem is that doesn't really work, and that's not how the body works. The body works as a whole. You can't just separate it into pieces. So let's take another example. Let's say high blood pressure. A patient comes in with high blood pressure. How are each of these individuals looking at the situation? Well, a functional nutritionist is going to say, the first thing they're going to ask is, well, why is the blood pressure high, right? Is it stress? Do they have a bad diet? Lack of exercise? Are they a smoker? Do they have chronic sympathetic dominance? Okay, and if you watch the video on ABC, and if you haven't, make sure you go watch that first, okay? The sympathetic is the division of the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. That's the fight or flight response, right? It increases everything, right? And everybody in today's world is constantly stressed and constantly in this sympathetic dominant state. Another thing we're always going to look into is, okay, what's the toxicity? Okay, what kind of toxins are they being exposed to, and what kind of environment are people in, right? And then, of course, we look at genetic type, epigenetic type things, okay? And really, especially focusing on the epigenetics, because now what we're finding is that you are not a slave to your genetics. It's really about how does the environment that you're in affect and activate those genetics, okay, to make you more susceptible to having a disease. Okay, now in the same situation with a medical doctor, okay, they look at it and they say, okay, the blood pressure's high, we gotta lower it automatically, boom. But the problem is you can't really think about it like that, because maybe the body purposefully raised the blood pressure in order to compensate for some other issue, right? Or if you're in a chronic sympathetic dominant state, right, your blood pressure is going to go up. That's just what the sympathetic nervous system does, is that automatically will raise your blood pressure because that's what it does, right? So, in this situation, the medical doctor says automatically we got to lower it. So what they're going to do is they're going to treat that with drugs to lower the blood pressure. They're probably going to put you on a blood thinner, and then they're going to look at your cholesterol, and if your cholesterol is high, even though that could be a compensation by the body for something else on purpose, they're going to give you a drug to lower your cholesterol. And they may ask if the patient smokes, as we would, right, and recommend to quit. I'll give them that. They do that. But then many times they use this genetics as an excuse. Well, you have a family history of heart disease. Well, what we're really learning now in the research is that it's really not about that. It's actually more about, okay, maybe you are more susceptible, but the environment that you have exposed yourself to, right? You may smoke or not eat well, right? You now have actually activated those genetics to be more likely to have heart disease. So, I beg the question, isn't it easier to prevent a disease than it is to treat it, right? I mean, doesn't that make more sense? Doesn't it make more sense to say, okay, this individual is tired, this individual has headaches, this individual is overweight and they're not, and they just never feel right. They have brain fog all the time, and they don't feel as snappy as they used to, right? That's a warning sign, right? And even if they fall into the normal blood ranges medically, they almost always will fall out of suboptimal. They will fall into a suboptimal category in the functional ranges, right? They will fall into a pattern in the functional ranges, where we can actually notice, okay, you have this blood work is off in this way, right? And your analysis is showing me this, right? And you correlate those things with the symptoms in the history, and then we can do something about it, treat at that time to resolve those and get you back into the optimal ranges, and then hopefully the symptoms go away and you never go all the way down the road where you actually develop a disease, right? Because once a disease develops, it's a lot harder to reverse it than it is to just notice that the disease, is going to develop by looking at your trends and then just preventing it at the beginning. It's a lot easier to prevent than to treat. So that's just a brief introduction to functional nutrition, and I hope you learned something. If you're interested in getting this work done in our office, if you're a patient or if you're a future patient, all you have to do is ask to schedule a nutritional consult, and we'll just kind of go over your history, get a little more in depth with that, and then we'll order some labs and different things to get started and to maybe figure out what might be going on. So I thank you, and I hope you have a great day.